you guys are spoiled. Yes, you are, because you get to just sit there, having a great time, waiting for my next video. Meanwhile, I have to deal with Unreal headaches for weeks on end. I don't think this is fair. I don't think this is fair at all, so it's time to drag you into the mud with me again, because we really need to set the record straight, don't we? I'm going insane, man. You want to see an authentic story of what it actually looks like to learn game development? You will. Let me catch you up to speed. I have committed to learning PC game development. And I mean, really learning all of PC game development, which is kind of unorthodox, but guys, I have a vision, okay, and it doesn't include other people's work. So whether it's programming, modeling, rigging, animation, or any of the other 100 things games contain, I want to be able to do everything myself, so I won't have a design Achilles heel that requires leaning on others. In order to learn all of this in a fun way, I've started my first game project, an Unreal 5 remake of what I consider to be my first ever game, Arena of Disco. A simple but stylish first-person shooter made on PlayStation's Dreams 6 years ago. It's not a good game, and while I'll look for ways to up the quality here and there, I need to rebuild so many skills in so many areas that similar quality to the original is more than enough. Perfect is the enemy of good. Now, last time I spoke to you, I hadn't touched Unreal in about 2 months because I was dating a girl and my brain was on fire, and then the breakup happened and I couldn't think about Unreal the whole time. Oh, the game end. On the game end, yeah. Last time I spoke to you, I'd learned the basics of programming and designing in Unreal, and 3D modeling, rigging and animating in Blender. Most importantly, I spent ages learning debugging my Blender to Unreal pipeline, in the end resulting in this proof of concept character. I scrapped everything and started from scratch, skipping the whole FPS template idea and just diving straight into making this game. So I made a new project, discovered that I still wasn't able to fix exporting bugs properly. I made a new character, discovered that I still don't remember how one should be put together. I made a new animation rig, discovered that, you know what, I really would not like to do this many times more. So this setup was serious. This was, for better or worse, going to be the final setup for this game, because I really don't want to do any of this ever again. To make my FPS character, I followed the tutorial series from Infima Games. It taught me a workflow for FPS animation in Blender that would have taken ages to discover myself. I made walking, sprinting and aiming animations without too much of a hassle, but then I knew I was going to have to prove myself soon. The reload animation. I love satisfying, impactful reloads, and I loved making them in Dreams. So I turned the tutorial off and tackled this challenge on my own. This is what my first ever reload animation looked like in Arena of Disco. Oh, floaty garbage. Yeah, I can do a lot better now. This is why having a lot of experience, even if it's in a non-professional program on a PlayStation, is so helpful. I know exactly what I want and I know exactly how to get there. That said, there is a lot of trial and error and frame-by-frame minutia involved in an animation like this. One wrong frame or just a couple degrees of rotation can make the difference between awkward and satisfying. An extra problem I faced here that I didn't have back in Dreams is deformation. Perfect is the enemy of good, so I modeled these arms myself with a quick hacking method and spent no further time at all polishing them. The result is that there were just a lot of positions the hand can be in that will stretch and break the arm in ugly ways. This was very limiting and annoying, and a lot of decisions based on poses in this animation were forced on me because I couldn't do it any other way. My next game I'll definitely look into mesh skinning a little bit more, but for this first project, whatever, it's fine.
Okay, I think I'm happy with this. The only thing is the animation looks perhaps a bit extreme in terms of camera movement, which is something you need to watch out for a little bit for motion sickness and stuff. But I've spent enough time on this. Perfect is the enemy of good. I can always polish later in the future if I want to. I think this is nice for now.
The days following completion of this animation, I spent building out the actual mechanics that use the animations, following the same tutorial still. And yeah, I don't think I'll ever be able to replicate anything that I did here without looking at the same tutorial. It's just also horrendously specific. The end result though is an amazing, playable character. Without any sounds or visuals to actually make it feel any good. Here's where I get nostalgic for Dreams again. You know, back in the day I used to be able to get sound effects in the engine itself. They were just a couple clicks away. And they still are. because I can use my recording software to record the sound effects from dreams, essentially performing a heist. So that's exactly what I did. Ambient sound for the level, footsteps, jump and land sounds, it's all mine. A couple years ago I made this FPS character that I never used. I recorded the firing sound and slammed it straight into Unreal as well. I also messed with particle effects again, resulting in a muzzle flash that I hope will be placeholder, but might just turn out to be the final one if I get lazy again, which is definitely a possibility, isn't it? I think it's safe to say that this feels a lot better than this. With the basic gameplay complete, I only saw 2 major obstacles left before I could fully start building out this game. First of all, making assets, because here's the thing. Yes, I have basic modeling skills now, but I don't have a system for assets. I want repeatable pipelines, workflows. This will allow me to make assets quicker, more deliberately, and with a more consistent art style than if I just did whatever each time. Talking about art style, while I appreciate Unreal 5's brute force realism and megascan assets and everything, I have actually come to miss Dreams and its painterly flex. Even an object with a single flat color in Dreams has a much more interesting look than a flat colored object in Unreal. The more I thought about it, the more I knew I had to find a way to get some of that painterliness back in this engine. The other obstacle that was slowly coming my way now is enemy AI. Yeah, that's a topic that has a history of paralyzing me. So let's see where to start. Assets or enemies? Assets or enemies? Assets or enemies, yeah. I couldn't start working on any of it again. I got completely overwhelmed. My brain just can't sit still. I couldn't think about any of these topics without conjuring up a bunch of side quests. Thinking of AI made me think of needing an enemy character. And in order to even have an enemy character, I need to learn getting animations online, retargeting them to models I've either made or customized myself, which requires me to learn how to texture models, which requires me to learn how I can get that painterly stuff working. Besides, I still barely understand UVs, and oh, I can't turn these textures into materials in Unreal without first knowing how that whole system works, of course. There are so many unknowns, I just froze. It's like my brain has 64 gigabytes of RAM, but only a 1-core CPU. You know, I can load all these thoughts in parallel, but I can only process them one at a time, ensuring that I feel permanently overwhelmed. There was like a whole week where I didn't do anything again because thinking about any of this immediately made me overflow. But okay, a breakthrough did come eventually. I got inspired from a random ADHD productivity video of all things, which I may or may not have ADHD, I've never been tested for it and I don't really care, okay? But listen. What if I just took that trail of thoughts and wrote it down, essentially solidifying it into existence? That's exactly what I did. I just wrote down everything my mind was bombarding me with in sequence, meaning that I worked top down. For this I need to learn that, and for that I need to learn that. This does 2 great things. First of all, it cleared my RAM. When you write stuff down, the mind is freed from having to juggle all those ideas. Second big win, I now had a surprisingly clear path to victory. I just needed to follow the lists from the bottom to the top. For assets, I first needed to experiment with some 2D art programs, see which ones I'd prefer. Next, figure out how to get that painterly style going. Next, fundamentally understand UVs, UV unwrapping and all that stuff, and finally learn everything there is to learn about material instancing in UE5. Now for the sake of making this the most authentic devlog series on YouTube, which it is, for this next section I'll go more in depth than I usually would, to really give you an understanding of what it's actually like to learn game development. The process I went through here is indicative of all the other processes I've gone through, but I just can't make a whole video on this level of depth or it'd be 3 hours and I'd spend more time editing than actually making this game. So, figuring out an asset workflow, step 1. Texturing in Procreate, an awesome 2D art app for the iPad. Just to experiment, I wanted to see if I could texture the gun model I made last video. So I export the model as a .obj file and yeah, then what? Well, here's the first annoying thing. I need to get that file on the iPad somehow, and I normally don't like abusing cloud services like this, but I guess I'll upload the file to Google Drive and then go to the iPad and download from Google Drive. So next I open Procreate, spend too much time looking for the file in the downloads folder somewhere, but whatever, I finally get it, import, and boom. So at a first glance, this is fantastic, right? Look, I can paint on the model and everything. At a second glance, why are there holes in my model? So I Google, and after scouring for a bit, I figure out that's probably the fact that my model has n-gons in it, that's the issue. N-gons, if you don't know, are polygons with more than 4 vertices. My model has them because I don't care, because Unreal doesn't care. But okay, if Procreate can't render a fucking pentagon, I'll first triangulate the model and then export to Procreate, fine. But okay, whatever, what does the export process back to Blender look like? Well, apparently Google Drive, the website, doesn't allow uploading files, so I had to use the app. But I didn't want to use the app because turns out this iPad is not actually mine, it's my parents', and I didn't want to log them out. But whatever, the website was already pissing me off enough because every login was triggering two-factor authentication, further cluttering my 1200 unread Gmail's account, triggering a mess cleanup of this whole thing a week later. Now, long story long, I exported this texture from Procreate, logged into Google Drive, did the two-factor authentication thing, found the file, uploaded it, went back to my PC, went over to Google Drive, downloaded the file, went over to my download folder, moved the file to the correct folder, and finally renamed it. Done. Conclusion, this workflow sucks. I don't want to do this every time. Sure, Procreate is awesome, and being able to paint on 3D models like this is super useful, but I'm looking for speed. As much quantity with as little as hit to quality as possible. This is just too much time dragging files around with too much potential for me to get distracted in the process. So step 2 then, experimenting texturing with the Blender plugin UcuPaint. I messed around, watched some tutorials, and holy, I had no idea what I was doing. I spent a bunch of time debugging this sphere disappearing in texture paint mode, only to realize it wasn't visible because I hadn't painted on the texture yet. It would take a surprising amount of time for me to wrap my head around how this plugin functions. It's the visuals that really threw me off. In object mode, UcuPaint will only show you the active layer you're painting on in the viewport, in RGB values, meaning if you're painting a metallic map, for example, instead of seeing the material change to metallic whenever you paint with white rather than black, you'll just see a white color as if you're painting in color. In material preview mode, you can then see everything layered together with the correct material properties. Dumb thing to get hung up on, but it genuinely took me a while to figure out what was going on here. Once I did, UcuPaint is awesome. It's not just a painting plugin, it also has a bunch of other handy tools like allowing you to bevel normals, resulting in edges that ditch that cheap digital hard edge gamey look, or allowing you to bake an ambient occlusion map in one button press. And all of that within Blender, no exporting, no external programs needed, this was the way forward. So step 3 then, figuring out that painterly art style. Now when I say painterly, I don't mean cell shading. And neither do I mean textures that simply have paint strokes on them. I mean Puss in Boots, arcane. 3D art that somehow renders looking like painted 2D. The trick, as I learned, mostly comes from hand-painted normal maps. Now if you don't know, a normal map is a flat 2D texture that contains information on which direction pixels are facing. Easiest is just to show. Here's a material without a normal map. And here's the same material with a normal map. It's ridiculous how powerful this thing is, as you can see. All the lighting here is fake. This is still just a rectangle, but the normal map makes it look like a high poly expensive asset. I assure you, every game abuses these things a lot. Now think about it, what would it look like if you started painting on a normal map? If you told the rendering engine, hey, instead of this rounded surface rendering smooth, it's made up of paint stroke shaped facets. Well, you get something like this. It looks awesome, right? So, of course I wanted to learn how to do this. The first tutorial I followed had me generate an object space normal map of this sphere. I then exported this image to GIMP, another free 2D art software because it has brushes that actually look like brushes, and painted the gradient to be more facets of flat color. Then back in Blender, I threw this painted normal map into the material and it didn't work. When you do the wrong thing with a normal map, it's clear now, you get really broken results. Of course, the issue just ended up being a wire plugged into the wrong input. Great, mission accomplished in the end. But things working in Blender does not necessarily mean things working in Unreal. When I tried applying the normal map in Unreal, it broke again. And I knew exactly why. Usually, normal maps look something like this, whereas mine looked like this. What's the difference? Well, these here are tangent space normal maps. They tell the rendering engine what direction pixels are facing relative to a flat surface, that blue color. I had an object space normal map. It tells the rendering engine what absolute direction pixels are facing, forwards, backwards, up and down. I needed a tangent space normal map, not an object space normal map. I spent a long time looking for an answer, first frantically trying to find a material function in Unreal that could just accept this object space map. I tried a bunch of stuff, but none of it worked. So next I Google, of course. The AI summary is hallucinating again, talks about a TBN matrix, I don't even want to know what it is. So next Reddit. I found exactly one thread on this, surprisingly a person following the same tutorial as me and running into the same roadblock. Now the solutions provided by the Redditors below were brutal. A 15-step process using Substance Designer and Substance Painter, both of which I don't have. This one, and I quote, "Since we have a 3x3 orthonormal matrix, the inverse is just a transpose, which means all we need to do is compute the dot product of n..." Sorry, no. Even if this works, no. But luckily there is one guy who gets it. I have to say, a lot of these answers appear way too complicated. Oh, I can't wait. I can practically smell the tangent normal space greatness from here. Give it to me, Redditor, show me how it's done. Now take the dot product of the input vector with tangent, bitangent and normal respectively. Let me stop you right there, I have an answer for you. It felt like I had reached a dead end, which was so annoying because the effect literally worked in Blender. I just needed those colors changed. But then, one last comment on this Reddit post, one I scrolled past at the beginning because it had no interaction. Applying the texture as per tutorial and then baking a tangent space normal map should work. I read this a couple times while my unfocused mind was somewhere else, and then suddenly snapped awake. Wait, could it be that easy? Yes, it sure could. All I needed to do was take the sphere with the object map applied and bake a tangent space normal map from it. Not even half a minute of work. Look, it's blue! So next I throw this into Unreal and I was excited to say the least. No time to waste, time for step 4, learning how UVs work. All this time I had been unwrapping and texturing and exporting without understanding much of what went on in this window. It's actually not that complicated. When modeling, you're generating not just X, Y and Z coordinates for all the vertices, but also U and V ones. These UV coordinates then specify in 2D space which bit of the texture those same faces in 3D space use. What I didn't understand initially is that UV coordinates are baked into the 3D model. I thought it was more like a map you can export separately. But okay, it's clear now that if I want to change how the texture applies, I need to replace the 3D model in Unreal with a new one. So it was time to make my first test asset. This neon wallcover piece from the original Arena of Disco. I'll go faster again now, by the way, because the amount of trouble this wall gave me. Yeah, you don't want to know. You don't want to know. I can make 10 videos about that whole experience. The main thing I ran into trying to follow my workflow is that, well, the wall is flat. And the normal painting technique only works on curved surfaces because it relies on me roughening up smooth gradients into painterly flecks. If there is no gradient, I don't know what colors will offset the normal map only slightly and in the correct direction. In the end, I decided for flat surfaces I'd go with a painterly roughness map instead of a painterly normal map. I also experimented with a glow map, but decided I'd just make the glowing edge a second material. And surprise, surprise, I wasn't happy. GIMP is the reason. Sure, painting these facets over gradients is very doable when we're talking about a sphere mapped to the entire square of texture. But if I have a UV map that's a lot messier, you're immediately lost to which face is which in 3D, and it becomes very easy to have paint strokes flow the wrong direction somewhere. I wanted to paint in 3D space, damn it. So I found another tutorial, one I initially deemed too advanced, but hey, I'm a professional now I guess because I totally did it. What's especially cool is that Craft Reaper, the legend in question, has made his brushes available online. So I downloaded the brushes and dragged one over an edge of my gun model. This is exactly what I was looking for. Normal painting like this is actually a lot of fun. I immediately did the gun, but then also the arms. This process did expose another mess up on creation of these models. Their UVs are mirrored. I had to paint both arms separately, and the same goes for both sides of the gun. Now what's cool is that just after the normal painting alone, you already get the painterly look, just through lighting alone. But to really sell it, I also painted the textures themselves. The arms in the original Arena of Disco were pure black, but I now did some slight color variation. The character looked a lot more artistically interesting now. But I had one more quest left before I could start mass producing assets. Material instancing. I already knew, just from being a gaming enthusiast I guess, that in Unreal making unique materials for every asset is a poorly optimized way of doing things. Instead you should make highly customizable materials and then instance from those. Basically, imagine I need a red glowing material in my game and a blue glowing material. If I make them separate materials, Unreal will load every script that has to do with materials twice and keep them both in memory. But if I instead make one material and make the color a tweakable parameter, Unreal loads the scripts just once and says, hey, that material is the same as the other one, but just tweak the RGB value a bit. Now this shouldn't surprise you at this point, but this led me on a whole other adventure that I won't bore you with. I mainly used Clint's tutorial to build up my master material, but I left some of his stuff out and added some of my own things. In the end it works great. Can I finally start making assets? Well, I thought so. So I opened Dreams and put everything I need to recreate in a row. Luckily, Arena of Discode really doesn't have that many assets, so I thought this was not going to be much of an issue. But then it hit me. How do I make floor and wall textures? Because there are two major problems in my way at the moment. One, I don't know how to make custom tileable textures. And two, I don't know how to keep a texture a consistent size when I start stretching floor pieces to fit a room. This sent me in another huge learning spiral. Seriously, I have gigabytes and gigabytes of footage of me fighting these problems. The solution I found in the end for making my own painted textures tileable is using GIMP again, even though I really didn't want to, specifically for its naadloos tegelen option. It doesn't look great, but I couldn't find anything better. Then for that stretching issue in Unreal, I went on a whole tutorial Sidequest spree, but I eventually found a way to include the solution as a toggleable option in my master material. I don't know why this isn't easier to do. Obviously when I create a floor I don't want it to stretch but tile. But whatever, the end result works. Then, one last surprise genius moment for myself. I was just painting a carpet texture in Blender when suddenly my newfound knowledge of UVs made me realize something. Wait, what if I arranged a couple of planes like this and made all their UVs fit the entire texture and overlap with each other? Now drawing on one plane clones that paint to the other ones. But even better, painting over an edge makes the paint jump from the right side of one plane to the left side of another, which because of the shared UV coordinates means painting on the left and right sides of the texture at the same time. Tiling! Yeah, remember when I was still doing programming at the beginning of this video? Because I don't. All this asset stuff took like a month. But okay, in the end, I do have my asset workflow now. In order, first 3D model, then UV unwrap, then generate object normal map, paint on the map in Blender in 3D now, generate tangent normal map and paint whatever base colors and metallic maps that are required. Then export all of those, create an instance of my master material in Unreal and feed all the maps back in. It took a while, but I was finally done. I had a workflow that I could apply to every asset, right? On opposite day, maybe. Because the first thing I tried to do is make the palm tree asset, for which I wanted to use a ready-made one and just edit the textures. But then I suddenly had to deal with transparency for the leaves, which apparently handled differently in Unreal than everything I've done before. And next I wanted to figure out animated textures for enemies in the future, which sent me down another huge rabbit hole. You get it at this point. There is a lot to learn. Yeah. And if I want to finish this game in a reasonable amount of time, I really need to stop working on this video and need to start working on the game again. So yeah, you enjoy your life. I'm gonna go get a couple headaches again, this time from learning enemy AI, which oh, that scares me. It scares me a lot. But yeah, we'll see how it turns out. See you in a couple weeks. Thank you for watching. I'll see you around.